Welcome to the Mental Insights Podcast. This is a community aimed at understanding all sides of mental health, addiction, and homelessness. Each interview will include either a personal story or an expert's advice within one of these fields. The goal of this project is to promote awareness, guidance, and support for anyone who is affected by these challenges. Thank you all for listening. Welcome back to the Mental Insights Podcast. This is your host, Brennan Cutuli, and we are here today for Season 2, Episode 3 with Elana Davidson. You may recognize the familiar face and voice from episode number 18 of Season 1 of the Mental Insights Podcast. We spoke about culture, emotions, and mental health. And here today, we're going to be changing it up a little bit, speaking about navigating relationships and social and emotional cues. If you don't know already and you haven't listened to the first episode, Elana Davidson is a transformational coach focusing on some topics such as childhood trauma, culture effects, and emotional responses. Elena's company is Healing Hearts and Minds, and where she has released her own book, Finding Your Own Happy. Elana will join the Mental Insights Podcast to speak about navigating relationships and the power of social and emotional cues. Thank you, Elana, for taking this time to be on the Mental Insights Podcast for your second episode. It's a pleasure to have you on again. I'm excited for today.
Yeah, I'm super excited to be back and to talk about some really juicy, important things that can have really significant impacts on our mental health. So great to be here again.
Wonderful. Well, to kick things off, we'll really dive in for this first part of the episode, mainly being within navigating relationships. So to start off, just what are some ways in that a relationship can affect our own mental health? So truly, what is the importance of relationships, of connection within the human mind, body, and spirit, what we need to drive ourselves every day?
I think that relationships are one of the things that impact our mental health the most. How we relate to other people, how we interact with them. There's a quote that I put in my book, and maybe you've heard it before, which is to say, before you diagnose yourself with depression and low self-esteem, first be sure that you're not surrounding yourself with assholes. And that is so important to understand what is you, what is your experience, and what is sort of the product of the people that you put yourself around and the messaging that the people give you. So if you're in an environment where people are really not seeing you fully or not appreciating who you are or giving you a message about yourself that isn't necessarily very positive, you might internalize that and really think it's you that's the problem, that there's something wrong with you. And for many of us, we don't even realize until we have the contrast. We get into a different environment around different people. And it's like, wow, oh, this person sees me so differently and treats me so differently. And I feel so much better with them. I had no idea that it wasn't me even. Like I thought it was me. I thought I was the problem because that's what the people around me told me. When in fact, I'm the same person over here with this person that I am with this other person. And one person appreciates who I am and how I'm showing up in life, and another person is criticizing it. So given that choice, I had actually that very experience where I was having almost the same conversation with two different people, and one person was really appreciating what I had to share and my insights, and another person was very critical of it and sort of kind of pulling me down. And I looked at that and I said, well, I'm being the same person in both situations. And given that, what would I like to choose? I think I'll choose to be around people that appreciate me for how I'm showing up. And the more that I really have looked at how am I being affected by the people in my life, and then making the adjustments toward what feels good, what feels supportive, what nurtures me, really the happier and better my life gets. And sometimes I get to these really hard places and I say, oh, wait a minute, haven't been interacting or engaging with people. What do my relationships look like? And as soon as I adjust that, like my happiness increases, I would say exponentially. So that's sort of an introduction of that whole idea, how relationships can really impact your mental health.
And it's so valuable to state that perspective change of, having two things to correlate to each other, to relate to each other, to see how someone actually is treating you. I think for many people, they're in a situation where they only have one connection with a person through this conversation, and they won't be able to see how they're even being treated. They may think it's the norm. They may just think, oh, I should still, be friends or be a family member with this person since, this is how it's been. This is just kind of, they're here for me maybe in some other terms. But when you have
Mhm.
that, when you have that contrast to see, oh, this person's treating me better and they may serve the same role, you start to learn what relationships are truly important and, who you want to surround yourself with. As well, for some people, they put others before themselves. So, you know,
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And that's a big, actually, it's interesting that you bring that up, because a lot of my work, I'm working with people who are sensitive to other people and other people's emotions. They're often what I call a caretaker or a rescuer. They've learned the habit of putting other people's needs and well-being before themselves and taking care of other people, often at what comes to their own expense. So if somebody's going through a hard time, you're going to show up for them, you're going to give, and you're going to give, and you're going to give. And I see a lot of my clients and a lot of the people that I associate with it, they extend themselves to the point where they're burning themselves out. And they're the ones that are always giving, and the people often that they're giving to are in such challenging places or such desperate circumstances that they just take and take and take. So if you've ever experienced somebody sort of in a like survival mode or in a space of desperation, they're just trying to keep their head above water. And so if you're a super giving person, it can just feel like you're being exhausted. And I didn't really understand how that was affecting how hugely that was affecting my mental health until I would get to the place of burnout almost. Like I would, because I cared, and it really comes from a place of caring and not wanting to see another human being suffer, right? And you want to do something to tend to their suffering. And yet I would start out feeling really happy to contribute and to be part of that experience of contributing. And then at some point, I wouldn't be happy about it, or it'd be at a cost to me. And then it would just get to the point where I had to almost just run away from everyone and everything because I couldn't take it anymore. And so I started to learn to notice where that edge is, where that space, and this is something that your listeners can pay attention to, is when does it go from being something that you enjoy doing and that feels like it's also contributing to your life to a place where it's not. And I tell my clients, look, don't do anything in your life that also doesn't contribute to you in some way. Because if you do, it's at cost to you. It's an expense to you. And in some way, it's destroying your own life. If you're doing things that like where the other person is benefiting and you're losing, you're harming yourself, you're harming your ability to help people in the future. And then you have two people that are in a hard place rather than one. And then another thing that I think is a nice visual that can help people really connect with this is you can't rescue somebody else if it's sinking your own ship. So if you're trying to help someone and you're starting to go down with them, you're not serving you and you're not serving them. And it's going to have a high cost to your happiness and your mental health.
it's so true, and that's why you really need to be selfish before you can be selfless, and you need to take that time in order to know yourself and know how you can navigate those waters correctly. Because like you're saying, you could sink your own ship and really bring both of you guys into a place of discomfort, into a place of, you know, large challenges. And when we're speaking about this, I can't help but look at the flip side. And this is something I've experienced as well, and many people do, is the aspect of codependency and how that can have a challenge within a relationship, within someone's mental health. And really, when you're depending upon somebody too much,
Well,
it can cause such a large challenge.
well, the interesting sort of flip side of being a rescuer or a caretaker is actually part of codependency. And in part, people rescue and caretake because it is a codependent relationship. And one of the sort of hopes or wishes for giving so much is that the other person is going to turn around and be there for you when you need them. And then there's also this incredible disappointment when that doesn't happen. And yeah, it can burn out relationships. You can lose those relationships altogether. And so being mindful of how you engage, and I like to think of like staying on your own center. Like if you're a tree, like you want to have your roots in the ground, you want to stay over your center, and you can lean from side to side a little bit. But if you lean over too much, or if you lean on someone too much, and if they're gone, you fall over, a little bit of a problem. You want to, and are those relationships helping you anchor into yourself more to get your own roots and to be solid in yourself? Because things outside of yourself are constantly shifting and changing. There's also some healing often to be done in those kinds of codependent relationships. So this sort of most codependent in a not dysfunctional way relationship is a child and a parent. We are completely codependent, interdependent when we're a kid, right? We need our parents in order to survive. We have a relationship of dependence, very much so. And that's important, but as we grow, we're learning how to grow apart. We're learning how to stand on our own 2 feet. A lot of the codependence that sort of is still present in adulthood goes back to being that little child, that little person that never got their needs for dependency and care met enough, right? So your parent didn't show up for you enough, didn't give you the nurturing that you need, didn't attend to you and your well-being sufficiently. And so you had this sort of need desperation pattern almost that showed up inside of you as an attempt to really fill what you expected and required from your parents that maybe they could never give you. So often when we get into especially intimate relationships, but also just relationships with other people, there's all these like sort of wounded or underdeveloped parts of ourselves that still exist, like that child that's just hungry for love and attention. And then you're trying to do all of the things, most often this is subconscious and we're not really aware of it, but we're behaving in ways that are trying to get, in essence, that attention and that care and that love from that parent that could never give it to us. So part of the way you unhook that codependence pattern and unhook that tendency to sort of grasp toward others is to start to look at yourself and do some of your own healing work, and to tend, and I do this in my coaching work, is to help my clients become the adult in themselves and then parent their own inner child so that they can take care of that part of themselves that feels so hurt or so desperate for love or approval or whatever that is. And a lot of us didn't get what we needed as kids, and so it's up to us to find ways to get that are healthy in adulthood. But the first step is really recognizing that maybe there's something going on there that needs attention.
Wonderful. Thank you for that. It really shows the importance of our relationships throughout our childhood and how impactful they can be. And subconsciously, we make these connections, we make these relationships later down in our life that are basically just shadows of how we were being treated initially as a child, which we in turn, we were codependent. We didn't have a decision. We didn't have a thought based on these relationships. We couldn't do anything for ourselves. And that just shows you how vital of a role parenting and these relationships are within our life. As
Mm-hmm.
well, the example of, just trying to heal in terms of, taking that next step and trying to see it in a new perspective, a new light. That's been shown throughout many different mental health challenges in terms of trying to recreate the image, the relationship, the experience that one had, but through a new perspective, through a new light. So then they won't have those challenging, those nightmarish reminders, experiences, memories of what could have continued on throughout their life. And as you were stating this, it kind of just triggered in my head of just the impact of even body language within the conversations that we have, whether it's through parental figures or whether it's through just our friendships, and how we conduct ourselves, how we hold ourselves within our everyday conversations. And you can tell a lot through body language. And how integral can body language be within navigating a relationship, whether it's just communicating effectively with somebody or whether it's navigating whether they're the right fit or not for whether it's an intimate relationship or whether it's just a friendly relationship.
Yeah, so I think body language is an important factor. I would say just where my mind is going, even more so, is like paying attention to your own subtle cues about relationship. And so that could be body language, but you might not even know where the cue is coming from. You just get a certain feeling around certain people and you're not sure why. I know and I'm a super intuitive and super empathic person. So I can literally get around somebody and feel like if they're going through emotionally hard time, I can feel their heaviness, or I can feel their angst, or I can feel all these different things and I used to always just think it was me. Like, what's wrong with me? Why can't I be around these people? Or like, why do I have these social issues? Or even, how I'm affected by people and how they interact with me or what they say. And I know for many of us, we've internalized that, and to always go back to like, what is it in me? What does it have to do with me? What's almost like, what's my problem? Or why is someone else treating me this way? What I've learned to do and help my clients do is to navigate out and start to look at, what are my feelings and my subtle cues telling me about this engagement? How do I really feel about this person? How do I feel about how they're showing up? Like, I used to be frustrated that people wouldn't return my calls or call me back, and the story in my head was almost like, why does nobody like me, right? But then I turned that around and I said, they're the ones that are being lame, right? Like, I have reached out in good faith to connect with someone that I thought was interesting and valued connecting with, and they didn't bother returning my phone call. That's actually on them, not on me. Yes, I'm disappointed because I wanted to connect, but that actually reflects way more on them than it does on me. And so to start to tease apart what is really mine to own and what is really somebody else's, and to begin to, and especially for sensitive people, to begin to externalize rather than internalize how people treat us, and say, no, that really doesn't have to do with me. And like, how do I feel about it? Like, yes, I actually really like it when people call me back or respond to my communications, and when they don't, it doesn't feel very good. And I get to choose if I want to have those kinds of relationships in my life or not. And if it doesn't feel good to me, how can I go toward what feels better? And the more that you can pay attention to what you feel, what you sense, and sometimes I know I've had certain people in my life where I'm just not feeling it. And that's like, it's a really hard place to be, because there's nothing I can put my finger on about why I don't really enjoy their company or why I don't really want to engage with them. And I've actually gotten to the point where I felt incredibly guilty about it. But at the same time, knowing my truth and honoring myself, so this gets back to codependency and being a rescuer, or choosing to include me in the equation of my life. When I really include me, I say like, okay, every time I'm around this person, I feel a dip in my well-being and a dip in my energy, and I'm not sure why, but it doesn't feel very good. So I'm just going to pull back a little bit because I value feeling good in myself. And then I might kind of see if I can figure out how to approach that relationship or that person in a way that can have greater ease or feel better. Maybe I change something about how we interact or the environment in which we communicate, or maybe I just become a little more of an acquaintance and less of a close friend. But I'm always looking for what's that sweet spot in my relationships that is adding value to my life and where I'm adding value to someone else's life. And sometimes, sometimes we're keeping our distance from people that actually have a lot more to contribute to us than we're letting them. And sometimes we're trying to forge this like close, intimate friendship with someone who's really not meant to be a close, intimate friend. And then there's all this friction and conflict. It affects our sense of self-esteem. It affects our emotional well-being. If you just took a few steps back, you might do good as a more casual friend or just somebody that you go do fun stuff with. And so when you can really find, I kind of think about it, what is the right relationship for each person that you have in your life? And for some people, it's like the now again, hey, how's it going, friend? And some people are going to be your close, intimate friends. And to be able to discern for yourself where you want that sort of person in a sphere, like you have your inner sphere, your closest best friends that maybe you talk to every day. And then there's like a little wider ring and then a little wider ring. And like, who are you letting into your inner circle that really is meant to be out here? And how is that impacting your mental health? And are there people knocking on the door that maybe want to be closer to you, that if you did would benefit your life and add value? And so to really look at that as like, where am I placing people? Where are they placing me? Are we being placed in the same place? It's I wrote on a Facebook post recently, something like, never make someone a better friend to you than they've decided that they want to be. It's like, you've decided that somebody's your bestie, but they don't feel that way. It's going to cause some friction and some tension and some hurt feelings. But if you really can meet people, then it's going to be much easier.
You're given great examples as to ways to identify relationships, ways to reflect upon them and take that next step of what's going to be positive, what's going to be beneficial for yourself as a relationship, and what you kind of need to reflect more upon. For, many of people that are listening say that people that have these challenges, but they haven't really reflected upon their relationships. They haven't necessarily said, oh, this person's beneficial for me, this one's not, and went down the list. For, someone who hasn't gone down this realm yet of reflection through their relationships, what's kind of the first way that they could navigate what's of the utmost importance? Do they go strictly to their inner circle first and try to see the closest people around them, or do they try to build a bigger community as friends first?
I would say, first of all, is to get connected with yourself, right? It's really hard to figure out what's going on if you don't know your own mind and your own heart. You don't know what's true for you. So one of the things that I did when I was really struggling with social relationships is I kind of just took myself out of engaging with people. And I went away to a cabin in the woods for 3 days. And I was feeling not so good about myself a lot based on my social relationships with people. And after 3 days, I felt much better and I felt much more connected to myself and the truth of who I am and my own essence. And I actually made a decision at that point that I keep revisiting, which was I would rather spend the rest of my life alone than spend one more minute in these crappy feeling social engagements. And so that was really a commitment to myself, and like, wow, my own company is enjoyable, first of all, and second of all, of such value that I don't want to detract from that by engaging in ways that don't work for me. So that's sort of the first step, is really getting connected with yourself and like, how am I being impacted? And sometimes you don't know because you're in the mix of it. And sometimes removing yourself can really help. Like maybe if you're not sure about a relationship, you know, stop, like take a break, take a friend break and see like, okay, how am I feeling now that I took that friend break? Does it feel, do I miss the person or do I feel better without them in my life? Another piece that I do often is, now I just do it mentally, but you can also write on a piece of paper, is do a friend inventory. Look at all of the different kind of people that you have in your life, and then look at what's the dynamic going on. Like, is this person overall adding to my sense of self-worth, value, enjoyment of life? Are they overall contributing, or are they detracting? Is there something funky about my interaction with them that I don't really enjoy? Okay, can I identify what that is? If you can, sometimes you can identify a little piece about it that you just don't enjoy, and then you can either like not engage in that way, or you can shift how you're relating so it doesn't feel weird anymore. But I do like we started this conversation out by saying, when I'm getting to like a hard place and like things are just not feeling very good in my life, this is often what I go to. I say, okay, what are my social dynamics with the people in my life right now? Which ones do I need to maybe step back from a little bit? And where can I get more of what I desire and more of what feels good? And I am really almost surprised each time how vastly it improves my quality of life and my sense of self. It's like, wow, I just stopped like trying. And I have this weird, I realized recently, actually, another time that I did this, I have this weird habit of like trying to get attention from people socially that are not really that available to me and not that interested. Going back to, if we talk about childhood, going back to childhood, growing up in a small community, in a small environment where I had a limited number of people to choose from, right? I went to school, there were 6 other girls in my class. That was my friend group. I was on the outside. None of them really liked me. And so because I was a kid and I was dependent on that environment to get my needs met, I learned the habit of constantly trying to win with them. And then I realized, wow, I'm doing the same thing now in my adulthood. Here's all of these people, or this core group of people that like aren't calling me back, aren't giving me invitations. And I'm in that exact same energetic space, which is like trying to get attention from people that don't really want to give it to me and feeling like nobody likes me. And then I went, wait a minute, it's a big wide world. I don't live like that anymore. These are not my only choices for social engagement. Like, and then I just dropped it. I let it go. I'm like, okay, I'm done with that. I'm walking away from that. But it was powerful for me to be able to trace back and recognize that there was this deep subconscious ingrained pattern that I had learned as a coping mechanism, because most of the time our subconscious stuff is a coping mechanism that in that given moment and situation was our best attempt effort to get our needs met or to resolve the situation. But then the circumstances change and you're still doing the same thing. And so once I cleared that up, I was like, wow, just let that go. I'm going to go hang out with the people that like actually are excited to see me. Wow. My whole life just changed just because I recognized that and shifted it.
It's definitely so valuable to take that time to reflect, and as you say, you learn new things as you go on, and you've already done a substantial amount of work. If people listen to the previous episode, you have much knowledge about this, about some of the things that are curated from your past, yet you're still learning. And I think that is a testament to how this work is never complete. It's never finished. And every day is our process, our opportunity to be able to take that step and and evaluate ourselves, evaluate our relationships. And that's something that we need to continually do.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's a self-development and self-awareness is it's like exercise, right? Like
Mhm.
you don't just get fit once and then you're fit. It's something you do regularly, and if you stop doing it, you see what happens. And so mental health is a lot the same way. It's not like check box done, I took care of that, moving on. It's a way of being, it's a way of associating the world, it's a way of functioning. And that, you know, if you and building new habits, and when you build those habits, you can become more automatic, but it's something that it requires some maintenance, just like your body requires maintenance. Like you got to eat, you got to, you know, get some exercise. Same with your emotional and mental well-being, you got to take care of it.
Exactly, and it's surely one of the toughest aspects that many people have faced, and we're seeing this large epidemic now, this big crises of people facing mental health challenges, and we need to be able to navigate this correctly. Within having a relationship, whether it's yourself to an external person, or say you are friends with somebody who is facing a mental health challenge, how can someone navigate that relationship according to providing a safe space for everybody and trying to, be supportive, but not maybe leaning into more of some of their troubles, and
Right.
trying to navigate those waters effectively?
Right. How to be a caring person and a supportive presence without it costing you, and without becoming a rescuer trying to save somebody. I mean, we can help other people, but ultimately, like, it's not your job to save someone. And there are times and places when you have exactly what is needed to help somebody shift an experience or change something about their lives. And there are other times when you don't have what's required, or you don't. So I think first of all is maintain your own sense of self and your own boundary, so to speak. Like where am I functioning within my zone of comfort? And again, just like we talked about, where am I staying in my center and not getting pulled? And is it not starting to have a negative effect on me? So how can I take care of myself first so that I can show up for this other person? And then as far as like addressing other people or helping other people through mental health, like I think first and foremost is just being present and being non-judgmental, and I know a space of acceptance and allowance, and like say, hey, like I'm here and I'm hearing you and I'm with you. And um, it takes, for some people, they really just don't even know how to show up for those people, or they're really uncomfortable with other people's uncomfortable feelings. I think that when I was going through severe depression as a teenager and I was feeling sometimes suicidal, I think it was really uncomfortable for my parents. And so then what I had to deal with was my own stuff. And then I had to deal with their discomfort and their freaking out and like, oh my God, ah, da, da, da. And I see, especially for people on the sort of far end of the mental health spectrum in a certain way, which is those people who are having suicidal thoughts or feeling really hopeless or desperate or so forth, that there's this place where if the people around you respond with what I call freak out, or their own emotional upset about what's going on with you, it becomes much harder for that person to share and to bring forth their pain, because now not only are they trying to manage what's going on for themselves, they're trying to protect you from their experience and trying to take care of your feelings as well. So I would say, as much as you can, if you're facing somebody who's in a difficult situation, be a calm presence. If you're having an internal freak out, please, if at all possible, don't let them know that, and don't put that on them, because then it it escalates their own feelings of isolation, their own feelings of brokenness, their own feelings of wrongness. And the more you can draw them in and include them and connect them, the better chance they are of sort of they're going to have of navigating that difficult place. And I found the more that I have been willing to talk about feeling suicidal and talk about being depressed, and not from a dark place, but from, hey, this is my experience and this is what helped me get through it, the more other people like have permission. Like there's a stigma, right? There's such a stigma around especially things like suicidality and like severe depression that people are so ashamed and so embarrassed to admit and talk about. So the more that we can show up with non-judgment and acceptance and sort of normalize in a certain way that it's okay to talk about these experiences, it's okay to have these experiences. And, you know, we also care about you and we don't want you to leave and we don't want you to do anything to hurt yourself. But how can we make it okay to have those conversations and not like a total feeling of that person? Does that answer your question? That was a whole bunch of stuff around.
It certainly does. And I think that's a great time to wrap up this part of speaking about navigating relationships. And then on the next part of the episode, we'll speak more about social and emotional cues. So for any information that we described within this episode, we'll have within the show notes, and we'll have Elena's work as well. So you can go to her website, go get her book, and see more about the work that she does currently, and tune in for the next episode to hear more about social and emotional cues and more about the work that Elana is doing. So thank you for listening to part 1 of episode 3 on season 2 of the Mental Insights podcast. Thank you all for listening to this episode. Please be sure to like, subscribe, and review to this podcast. Let us know what you learned from this episode and what you would like to hear in the next episode. This has been your host, Brennan Cutuli of the Mental Insights podcast. Have a wonderful day.